You probably know the banana, the world's most popular fruit and one of the most widely cultivated crops in general all across the planet. But what you might not know is how unlikely it is that any of this even happened. The path of the banana is crazy. It's a 10,000-year story of incredible luck, human ingenuity, and catastrophic greed. Bananas led to breakthroughs in technology, played a role in our religion and mythology, and even helped bring down the Berlin Wall. But they also caused international crises, gave us wars and dictatorships, and today, we are here for all of it. Following the trail of the banana through the centuries and chasing the path from one side of the world to the other. And of course, we're also diving into the incredible universe of bananas in cuisine and tracking down some of history's most important varietals. This is the story of the banana, today on OTR. In the oldest Austronesian settlements across today's Indonesia and Malaysia, there's one story shared in common. Even though a lot of these groups have been separated for thousands of years, there's almost always a version of the same origin legend, which starts with the creator, the king of all the gods, offering humans a choice of two items, a stone or a banana. Unfortunately, the creator left it up to the people to figure out the meaning behind these options, and they did what any of us would have done in that situation, and said, hey, we're hungry. It's primitive history. We don't have any restaurants, we're gonna take this delicious banana, and you can have that stone and bring it back to wherever it came from, thank you very much. But of course this was a test and we failed. See, stones last forever, but bananas give their fruit and then die, and from then on so would we. We could have had immortality, but instead we got bananas. Now, despite how it sounds, this is not meant to be a negative story. If anything, the implication is that eternal life would be as boring as a rock, and bananas symbolize everything fresh and vibrant about our limited time here on Earth. And it seems like a lot of people agree. Bananas are the fourth most widely cultivated food crop on the planet, the most popular fruit, more than 120 billion kilograms harvested every single year. We eat them raw as a jolt of energy, fry them as a snack or side dish, and even light them on fire as a dessert. Bananas are the staple food of much of Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. In Rwanda, the average person consumes an astonishing 116 kilos per person per year. And hell, in Uganda, the word for food, matoke, is literally the word for banana. You can find bananas with almost every meal throughout the South Pacific. In fact, those are bananas on the flag of Fiji. And across the Asian tropics, it's not just the fruit that's beloved. Banana stems and flowers are key ingredients. And banana leaves, well, those are used for everything from wrapping meat for grilling, to plates for dinner, to packaging for pretty much anything as takeout. So ingrained are bananas in our everyday lives that today we can see them on a baseball field, as movie titles, as the name of musical artists, on legendary album covers designed by Andy Warhol, and hell, someone even paid $6.2 million for a single banana taped to a wall, though that is less about bananas than about our own failing existence as a species. Anyway, bananas are a part of our language. When we're really excited, we go bananas. A big boss is a top banana, which is much better than having to play second banana. And beyond English, the list is endless. To the French, if you're really happy, you have the banana. A proverb in Swahili uses bananas to emphasize patience, and here in Thailand, something easy and effortless is a banana story. Which is ironic because the story of the banana is the least banana story we could possibly imagine. It is unbelievably complicated. And I'm not even talking about all the controversial stuff we're gonna get to later. Even the beginning is a scientific food fight. The fruit that we now call a banana, if you break down every strand of DNA and every molecule within the plant, what you end up with is a mishmash of so many different types of bananas that over the last 10,000 years have been crossbred and hybridized that even the best research, papers by academics who've literally spent entire careers studying just this one topic, basically throw their hands up and say, we don't know where they come from, no idea. The thing about wild bananas is they are extremely efficient. The seeds, and yes, wild bananas have seeds, well, those are carried by birds and bats and mammals, and hell, they even float across water, which expands the range of the plant even further. If you analyze the genetic structure of a modern banana, you would find distinctive hallmarks. of varietals native to Borneo, the Malay Peninsula, Northeast India, the Philippines, and even right here in Thailand, and identifying a home is literally impossible. And if we rely on biodiversity, which is usually a good way to figure out where something comes from, well, for bananas, it's basically a four-way tie between the Indonesian islands, the Malay Peninsula, the Bay of Bengal in Northeast India, and Uganda in the middle of Africa. Again, scientists who spend their lives studying this one topic have no idea where bananas come from, so we're not even going to try. But it doesn't mean that our story doesn't have a starting point, a ground zero for all the wild stuff that we need to get into. So we're going to start there, with the first step on a long journey that is truly bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Let's get into it. Anyone who's ever made food in a kitchen, from the best chefs in the top restaurants to a home cook, knows that to maximize flavor, you need to throw in some herbs. Basil, oregano, thyme, herbs. But what you might not realize is that there is one herb that towers over the rest of them, in a very literal sense. That, of course, would be the banana, the world's biggest herb. Not a tree, even though it can grow to 30 feet tall. There is no wood. It's a massive stem that produces seeds and then dies after a single flowering cycle. Therefore, it's an herb. To the people of the Asian tropics, thousands or even millions of years ago, this unique plant was highly valuable. The stem itself contains water, utilized as a means of survival during droughts. The fibers of the stems were made into rope and textiles. The sap was used to dress wounds and prevent infection, and the stems themselves were tied together to make rafts, some of the world's earliest flotation devices. Banana leaves were used for roofing, as insulation, mats to cover floors, and a burn-resistant wrapping for food, a technique we find as far back as 50,000 years ago in today's Sri Lanka and still essential across the Asian continent. Early humans used bananas for food as well, boiling or roasting the starchy core of the stem and consuming the flowers. Basically, we used all parts of the banana plant except for the fruit, and that was for a very good reason. In nature, bananas were basically inedible, starchy, full of tannins, and most of all, packed with seeds so hard they can break a tooth. As many as 60, the size of peppercorns, jammed into a fruit just 9 centimeters long and less than a single centimeter in diameter. And that is the story of bananas. Until around 9,000 years ago in the Wagai Valley of the island of Papua, when farmers noticed an evolutionary mistake, a complete biological accident. A banana plant with fruits that contained no seeds and were sweet, packed with nutrition, and easy to eat. So the Papuan farmers cleared a patch of jungle, cut away the shoots or suckers from the seedless banana stems, and planted them in the ground. And thus was born not just the first domesticated banana, but the first example of cloning ever seen in agricultural history. Now, the thing about cloning is it means a plant is reproduced without fertilization. And without fertilization, fruits don't usually grow. So, without getting too deep into the science, these banana cuttings should not have worked, and that should have been the end of this story. But by some fluke of genetics, bananas turned out to be what's known as parthenocarpic. Basically, they can still make fruits without being fertilized. This is extremely uncommon. In the entire world of nature, it basically only applies to pineapples, wild parsnips, and bananas. So in no time, the entire Wagai Valley was covered in delicious and edible bananas that would be recognizable even today. Around 1500 BC, a group of sailors from the Philippines arrived in Papua, the Austronesians, on the path towards settling all across the Pacific. And edible bananas must have been massively exciting because the Austronesians loaded up boats and sailed right back to the Philippines, sharing this new discovery and then introducing edible bananas to mainland Southeast Asia, China, and India. At first, this was greeted with excitement, but that soon faded as banana crops failed almost as quickly as they appeared. See, the Papuan banana might have been healthy and delicious, but it had evolved on Papua, which meant clones of the plant itself only thrived in similar climates. This species, known today as Musa acuminata, needs heavy rainfall, easy drainage, lots of direct sunlight, and almost no wind because the leaves are fragile. To this day, sweet bananas, the kind you grab as a snack on the go, well, they are genetic clones of that very first Papuan varietal, and can only be grown in a specific set of tropical conditions. But let's go back to the Austronesian diaspora, 3,500 years ago. As Musa acuminata spread inland, crops kept failing. until farmers in northeast India began crossing them with a local native species, one completely inedible, firm and starchy, but with the advantage of being incredibly hardy. The Bengali bananas, in scientific terms Musa balbisiana, were a perfect counterpart to the Papuan varietal. They can thrive in any reasonably warm climate. They tolerate dry conditions and bear fruit in the middle of a drought. The tree can grow in the highlands, put up with extreme winds, and even survive occasional frost. So the trick was finding a way to breed the two banana species while maximizing the best qualities of each type. The end result would be two new hybrids, one with two Papuan chromosomes and one from the Indian plant. This one would retain some sweetness, it could be eaten raw when fully ripe, or cooked to break down the starch. It could grow in a wider range of climates and adapt to broader conditions. Today we call this the plantain. And the other hybrid would lean heavier on the Indian banana with two of those chromosomes and only one from Papua. Planted, the fruits would still be seedless and edible, but they were too starchy to eat raw and had to be grilled or boiled, so they'd become known as cooking bananas. These could withstand conditions just as diverse as their ancestor, the Musa balbisiana. And all of a sudden, around the year 500 BC, bananas were spreading out in every direction. The sweet variety expanding into the South Pacific with the Austronesians, plantains catching on in the Southeast Asian lowlands, and cooking bananas, well, they were about to head west and change the course of history. In the early days of the Silk Road, it was hard to transport bananas. Even in the best conditions, the fruit itself would begin to rot after about a week, and the sprouts, the suckers, well, they could last longer, but only if they were constantly kept moist so that they didn't dry out and die. This was borderline impossible on overland caravans, but it was doable on ocean voyages. The Austronesians are proof of that potential. This was how cooking bananas would find their way to the Middle East. Around 2,500 years ago, on spice trading boats sailing from Gujarat in northwest India to the port cities of Oman at the mouth of the Arabian Peninsula. In Oman, these would quickly take root, but they weren't particularly exciting, and there's not much evidence of their use in cuisine. But when Omani traders sailed back the other way and encountered sweet bananas, well, figuring out how to grow those in the desert became something of an obsession. The Arabs understood that the biggest issue was a lack of water. Obviously, the dry desert was not conducive to the Papuan species of banana. So massive investments were made in irrigation. Workers in Oman and today's Saudi Arabia digging underwater tunnels called qanats, first developed by the ancient Persians. When surface water was available, water wheels would be constructed, what's known as norias, adapted by Syrian engineers based on Greek technology, feeding a new system of aqueducts. But still, banana plants struggled, until farmers around today's Israel, Lebanon, and Jordan figured out that the sunlight was too intense and began planting bananas side by side with taller trees like date palms, which created a canopy, in the process trapping the moisture released by banana plants and creating a microclimate, allowing even more crops to be cultivated underneath. And by the last centuries BC, all three types of bananas could now be grown in the Middle East. Here's why that matters. All that work that had gone into somehow figuring out how to grow just this one delicacy would be applied to other types of produce. The Arab world in a very short time went from being an inhospitable desert to a land of abundance. And when the first Islamic caliphate began conquering the surrounding region, these techniques came along, vastly increasing the available food across the Levant, Central Asia, and beyond. The so-called Arab agricultural revolution gave rise to massive new cities, expanding urban populations, and a huge development in farming technology, and all of it was triggered by the simple desire to grow really good bananas. And finally, that gives us an excuse to take a break for our first meal. It's always a special occasion here on this channel whenever we film a history of video, because somehow most of the time it gives us an excuse to head to Bangkok's Arab Quarter, one of the most vibrant Middle Eastern neighborhoods in all of Southeast Asia. Okay, so it is later in the video than we would usually take our first meal break, so we're starving. I was gonna say that I'm not gonna make you wait too long to dive in, but obviously that does not need to be said. All right, so really quickly, I'm gonna be fast because we have a lot to eat and a lot more of the story to get to. This is a Yemeni restaurant. Yemen obviously is on the Arabian Peninsula, right next to Oman, which is where this whole story of bananas starts in the Middle East. And yeah, so on the table, this is very classic Yemeni food. The bread, the fasa, which we've had on the channel before, I believe. I don't remember when, but I know that we've done it. Hummus, muammara, which is actually Syrian, and then our rice, but our banana portion of the meal, which we would normally have as a dessert, but I'm gonna start with that. This is fatah, so this is gonna be bread mashed up with banana, and then this one is the specialty at this restaurant.
You gonna try it first?
Which is the first thing I'm gonna try. Yeah, this is called masub. It's classic in the Middle East, made from overripe bananas pounded with bread, cream, honey, nuts. It looks incredible, and that's the first thing that I'm gonna taste.
Can try a little bit of it.
You
too.
can try whatever you want.
My favorite banana dish here is this meat stew.
And I got a banana juice too, with milk. Yeah, can we pretend like there's bananas in that meat stew?
Oh, I love it.
Do you want to do the description?
This is a very good fuel for runners. It's so carby. I would do it before my every race, honestly. It's bread and banana mix. It's brilliant. Should I sell it?
About 100 years after the first traders from Oman encountered bananas in northwest India, that region would be invaded by Alexander of Macedon. According to accounts of this expedition recorded by the Greek naturalist Theophrastus, the people of the Indus Valley grew a plant unlike anything ever seen before in the West. But almost nothing was recorded of the taste of bananas. Instead, what was most significant was that this was, apparently, the only food consumed by Indian priests, the holy men of the Hindu faith. See, because edible bananas could only be planted by cloning instead of relying on animals to consume and spread the seeds, bananas were recorded in the Puranas as one of only two completely pure foods, untainted by any desecration. Coconuts, by the way, were the other one. And it wasn't just the fruit of the banana elevated to a high stature in ancient India. The stem, containing layer upon layer of organic material, was described as a representation of the fabric of the universe, made bit by the gods Vishnu and Lakshmi, who in Hindu mythology are said to reside, at least in spirit, within banana plants themselves. It would become a Hindu tradition to worship bananas on each Thursday, the day of Vishnu, by dressing in yellow, chanting devotionals, and making offerings to banana trees. And when all of this was encountered by Alexander the Great, his men would name bananas the food of the sages, or the Hindu mystics. Now, I bring this up for two reasons. First of all, that name would stick. To this day, the scientific term for domesticated bananas is Musa sapientum, the fruit of the holy men. And second, well, it means it's time for us to dive into bananas in Old World mythology. When the first Austronesians carried bananas out of Papua, they brought along stories, parables of bananas as a representation of life and death. And before long, wherever they would be planted, new legends would show up to explain the arrival of this captivating plant. In the Philippines, the Austronesian homeland, the story would tell of a spirit named Saging, who decided one day he wanted to visit the realm of the humans. While he was here, he fell in love with a mortal woman, the two becoming inseparable, but he knew it couldn't last because he'd need to return home. One day, he finally confessed his true identity, and the two held hands as he vanished into the spirit world. And when he was gone, his hands remained, so his lover buried them in the ground, where they would grow into the most wonderful fruit, in the shape of the hands of the spirit saging. This, by the way, would inspire the name of bananas in the Philippines, to this day in Tagalog known as saging. The next story comes from Hawaii, where bananas are so revered as a foundational source of food that they're seen as the embodiment of the creator, the god Kanaloa, and in ceremonies of sacrifice it was acceptable to give bananas in place of humans. So sacred were bananas that only men were allowed to farm or consume them. If a woman so much as touched a banana, the punishment was death, a law finally repealed in the year 1819. But the main Hawaiian banana legend is the island's version of the Odyssey, the myth of Kukali, who set out on a quest to visit Tahiti in the lands of the South Pacific, carrying only a magic banana that would never let him go hungry. Kukali survived for weeks on the water, then encountered a series of monstrous creatures, did battle with sorcerers and fought entire armies and always won, thanks to this banana. Finally, Kukali would win the heart of the daughter of Pele, the goddess of volcanoes, and the two would return to Hawaii to protect the local people. In mainland Southeast Asia, the most common stories tell of ghosts or spirits who live in groves of banana trees. Here in Thailand, embodied as Nang Kani, who's kind and benevolent, offering sustenance to Buddhist monks and those in need, but bringing a dark vengeance on any man who's mistreated women. This, by the way, is pretty much exactly the opposite of the version told in Okinawa, Japan, where the banana tree spirit, known as Bashu Nose, was said to transform into a handsome man to seduce passing women, impregnating them with demon children. As such, until the modern era, women in Okinawa were not allowed to walk past banana trees alone after sunset. But on the entire planet, nowhere are there as many stories, celebrations, or legends about bananas as there are in Sub-Saharan Africa. The banana was first introduced to the African continent by way of Madagascar, brought by the Austronesians around the 5th century AD. Now, everywhere else across Asia and the Middle East, bananas had been enjoyed or valued. But in Africa, they would literally transform society. The hybrid varieties, the plantain and the cooking banana, took fantastically well to the African soil, especially a tropical band stretching from the region around the Great Lakes to the western edge of the Atlantic coast, what we now call the Banana Belt. Prior to the introduction of this plant, the people were hunter-gatherers, living a nomadic life in the absence of any native staple crops. But thanks to the banana, towns began to be settled, and cities and entire civilizations would take shape. To this day, 200 million people on the African continent rely on bananas as the primary staple food. And just about every single tribe, every culture has a foundational story about bananas. We'll start with a legend from Uganda, specifically the Baganda people of the land around Lake Victoria. According to their mythology, the first man on Earth was named Chintu, who lived in total isolation with just a cow for company. One day, a woman named Nambi, the daughter of the sky god, decided to visit this planet and fell in love with Chintu. In time, the sky god decided to bless the marriage and allow the two to begin creating a new society together here on Earth. And as a wedding gift, he gave them banana shoots to plant in the ground. But this is not just a happy story. See, the sky god also had a son, Walumbe, what we call death. And in a hurry to escape back to Earth before Walumbe came home, Nambi accidentally forgot her banana shoots. She raced back to heaven, but it was too late. Walumbe had spotted her and, tracking her, returned to her new home planet. He would follow. And that's why humans are doomed to be mortal. The next story belongs to the Ashanti people of what's now Ghana. Now, there are countless tales in Ghanese mythology about Anansi the spider, the legendary trickster. It's a common theme that Anansi uses his cunning and craftiness to steal bananas belonging to other creatures. But his entire legend begins with one specific myth, where Anansi was being chased through the jungle by a monkey and a hyena. Seeing his plight, the banana tree called out, telling him to take its strong fibers to make a bridge high up in the canopy. At first, he sat on this long string, his pursuers waiting below. But then Anansi saw a fly, trapped it in the banana fibers, and realized he could stay forever, catching his own food, so the others gave up and left him alone. This was how spider webs were created, and so iconic is this story in the culture of Ghana, that Anansi's web would inspire the patterns of kente cloth. And finally, for one last one, we head to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where in the foundational story of the Nyanga people, the famous Epic of Mwindo, the hero comes face to face with Muisa, the god of the underworld. Muisa plans to kill Mwindo, but first he wants to humiliate him. So he gives him the task of planting an entire field of bananas, raising them to maturity and harvesting the fruit all in one single day. Mwindo raises his magic scepter and does it in an instant. After which he battles Muisa, defeats him, and uses his banana-growing prowess to help take care of the people of his new country. Anyway, we need to get back to the history, but this feels like a good excuse for us to take a break and try an African version of bananas. About 2 years ago, pretty much right after the last time we had a chance to showcase West African food here in an OTR video, when we did the story of the history of rice, well, Nigerian cuisine here in Bangkok took a major leap forward, with the opening of the incredible Tea Eunice, run by a second-generation chef who literally flies home a half dozen times a year to stock up on ingredients, including making sure there's always fresh supply of that quintessential signature of the coastal lowlands, the plantain.
So we'll talk about plantains, which is the reason why we're here in just a second. But first of all, can you just go one by one and tell me what we have on the table?
So right here we have jollof rice with barbecue chicken. So here we have native rice, but normally we used to call it concoction rice, but it's native rice right now. Here we have a goosey. This is May food in Nigeria. There's no how you want to talk about Nigeria food, you have to also the most famous food, you understand. But when you go back to Nigeria, it's not one of the famous food. We still have vegetable soup. We have a lot of idikaiko soup, but in abroad, egusi has become the famous soup.
Why do you think that is? Is it because egusi seeds can be dried and shipped abroad, so it's easier to transport? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I can tell you. This egusi we bought it here in Thailand. Mm-hmm. So it's shipped is very easily for them to get it down here. And here is we call it porridge beans with a plantain, with beef, with a stew sauce. Here is the cassava flour. We call it fufu. And here is plantain. Everybody know what is it. You know, we Nigerian, we West Africa, we can't do anything. Eating rice, we have to have our plantain. Yeah, here is the plantain. And here we also have mortar. So this is mortar, and as a Nigerian, we always drink this. Sometimes we mix this mortar with milk. Plantain is kind of a snack for us. You know, when we eat it, you know, it's very sweet. When it's ripe, it's sweet. And when you're eating plantain with rice, it's giving kind of sweetened taste that make like complete for us to eat. But sometimes we eat our rice finish and we also eat the plantain after. Some people see it as a snack, but some people see like, okay, this plantain is like, I can say plantain is one of our culture as well, cultural food that some people cannot do without eating. They can't eat rice without plantain. You understand? For me, I can eat rice without plantain, but some people cannot eat rice without plantain. With a ripe plantain, sometimes I have a customer coming in, when we tell them the plantain finish, they say, oh no, they were not going to eat their rice. So they want to eat their rice with plantain. You know, in West Africa, plantain become a favorite food for everybody. You can't say you don't like plantain. It's something we started eating when we were small.
All right, so first of all, this is not staged for the camera. This is the first time we've been to this restaurant. I am extremely excited. The reputation has been growing in Bangkok that we have a phenomenal Nigerian restaurant that's fairly new. What are you, about 2 years, something like that here, this restaurant? How many years now for this restaurant here?
That's close to 2 years.
2 years? Yeah, okay. I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
Daria, this is like competitive eating right now.
It's gonna get what faster?
I'm just trying to get as much as I can before Daria just takes it all. So yeah, again, in a savory application, plantains, you've heard, like I've been talking about bananas and plantains since we started this video. Here, I really just want to eat. But it's always interesting how people use the sweetness of the ingredient or the richness or the fattiness in a lot of different applications to pair with something. I'm just gonna start eating.
Please.
Ah, you can tell from the
I'm
texture this is
blocking
gonna be
you
really good.
with my arms taking food anyway, so. All right. Delicious?
Oh my gosh, the smokiness in the agusi is just, you're gonna love this. I should eat a plantain. This is a banana video. I'm like sitting here forgetting what we're here for. Oh my gosh, Daria, have you tried this? Dude, this is. Yeah, no, do exactly what I do. Do exactly what I just did. Get everything in one bite. God, this is so good.
What is it?
Beans? Wow. Okay,
Beans.
I'm gonna cut this off, Dennis. I want you to eat while it's warm. This is delicious. I would just have this for myself. Just good, yeah?
The first Europeans to encounter bananas, at least as far as we can tell from any written records, were crusaders who saw them in the Holy Land in the 11th century AD. To the Christians, the discovery of bananas was no less than a justification for the entire invasion. After all, if you cut a banana in half, the vestigial seeds look like an image of the cross. Or at least that's how it would be interpreted. As a matter of fact, they would name the fruit the fig of crucifixion. It was widely believed among the soldiers of the Crusades that it was actually the banana, not the apple, that was found in the Garden of Eden. And it's guessed, although we have no proof, that this was the version of the story told by Middle Eastern Christians since the days of the Bible. It does make sense. Apples, at least in a modern context, did not exist in the Levant at the time of the Old Testament, but bananas absolutely did. And beyond that, the idea of using the leaves as clothing makes zero sense when it comes to apples. But banana leaves can and often have been used for that purpose. The Hebrew Bible doesn't actually specify what the forbidden fruit was. The entire idea that it was an apple comes from a mistranslation. The word evil in Latin spelled the same as the word for apple tree. But regardless, since bananas were impossible to ship fresh and didn't grow in Europe, within a century they would disappear from the record and appear to have been forgotten until a few hundred years later when a series of events would take place that would catapult the banana into sudden global prominence. In 1444, Prince Henry of Portugal needed men to crew his ships, so he hired a fleet of captains to sail to Africa and raid the coastline for slaves. One of these commanders was a man named Dinis Diaz, and at first he followed orders, taking a few captives from today's Morocco, then continuing south, when he realized he'd gone further than any European ever had before. So he decided to blow off slaving and start exploring. He reached the tip of Senegal, naming the peninsula Cape Verde, still attached today to a chain of islands offshore. From there, he'd turn his boat inland, following the Senegal River and making contact with an empire called the Jollof, previously unknown to Europeans. And in Jollof territory, Diaz would notice an unfamiliar fruit, eaten as a staple by the local people. He'd bring samples back to Lisbon, which of course wouldn't make it, but the name he'd record would stick, a Senegalese Jollof word pronounced banana. Anyway, this doesn't seem like it made an immediate impact in Europe. Diaz would forget about bananas and get right back to slaving, and as far as we know, the plant itself would only end up planted in a few gardens on the Canary Islands, an exotic curiosity, and that's about it. The Portuguese didn't see much value in bananas, and in 1479 they traded the Canary Islands to the Spanish in exchange for the rights to Madeira, and bananas would remain in obscurity for another generation, before everything would change. We fast forward to 1515. Spain is now the dominant power in the New World, establishing forts and colonies in the Americas and building large-scale sugar plantations on the island of Hispaniola, then throughout the Caribbean. To staff these factories, they started importing massive numbers of slaves from Africa, but soon found themselves in a crisis of how to keep these workers fed, preferably as cheaply and efficiently as possible. Word of this dilemma reached the Canary Islands, where a Dominican friar named Tomas de Berlanga noticed a plant that seemed to grow incredibly quickly, required no tools or knowledge to cultivate, and apparently thrived in the tropics. He loaded a boat in Tenerife with shoots of bananas, calling the plant the Guinea plane tree or Platano de Guinea, a name we now pronounce as plantains. These plantains, all exact clones of the version once taken from Senegal, itself cloned from a fruit carried 1,000 years earlier from India to Java then Madagascar, well, that would quickly become the most essential crop grown as slave food across the Caribbean, and then soon enough in Mexico and South America. De Berlanga himself would go on to be appointed as the chief bishop of Panama, although that's not how he's best remembered, and neither is his contribution to the spread of bananas. Of all things, his modern claim to fame comes because in 1535, on a sail from Panama to Peru, his ship was blown off course and he spent weeks drifting at sea, eventually washing up on a previously unknown landmass. And that's why today Tomas de Berlanga is most famously referenced as the guy who discovered the Galapagos Islands. Anyway, in the American tropics, bananas would become ubiquitous, and not just as a food for slaves. At some point, the colonial farmers figured out the same thing discovered 1,000 years earlier in the Middle East, that bananas with their huge leaves could provide shade to other crops that couldn't handle direct sunlight. Hence, bananas would be planted throughout fields of coffee and cacao and other commercial farmland ventures. By the middle of the 16th century, just 2 decades after the first bananas were brought to the New World from the Canary Islands, the fruit would be so widespread that sailors coming from Europe assumed that they were endemic to the Americas. Traders loaded ships with bananas and sent them back across the Atlantic. The only example of a plant from the Old World technically sold in both directions during the Columbian Exchange. And as ridiculous as this sounds, it would get even dumber. In 1609, when a man by the name of Garcilaso de la Vega wrote a book about the history of South America, describing plantains as an ancient local delicacy and including completely fabricated stories about how they'd been used long ago in Incan religious ceremonies. And for the next 200 years, this would be the official canon. Bananas in Europe categorized along with corn and tobacco as a fascinating discovery from the New World. Anyway, even though this was bullshit, it's not hard to see how it was believed. Thanks to the knowledge and expertise of African slaves, the colonies of Central and South America would quickly develop a concentration of banana-based recipes, unlike just about anywhere else on Earth. To this day, a trip to the region is to encounter snacks like tostones, served in various forms all throughout the Americas, adapted directly from a West African technique native to Ghana, Nigeria, and the Ivory Coast. Plantains in the Western world can be a breakfast dish, like mangu in the Dominican Republic, and tigrillo from Ecuador, made with mashed green plantains, scrambled eggs, and cheese. They're an everyday essential, see mofongo, the national dish of Puerto Rico, or the incredible plantain flour dumplings known as bolon de verde, native to Ecuador. Fried sweet plantains are a component or side for signatures like pabellon criollo, iconic in Venezuela, and the platter from Colombia known as bandeja paisa. Plantains are also a Colombian street food, stuffed with cheese and called aborrajados. In Panama, you'll find them made into a soup, along with corn and cassava, what's known as sancocho. And in parts of southern Mexico, banana leaves are even used to wrap tamales, adding a depth of flavor to the steamed cornmeal. We still have a long way to go in this story, and the worst is most definitely still to come. But it feels appropriate that before we move on, we should take a break for a quick snack of New World plantains. After some massive meals, we're going to breeze through this section for 3 main reasons. First, we've filmed at this restaurant before, in another video on the history of something. Second, we're getting into the heart of this story and need to keep going. But then there's also the fact that we just came from a West African restaurant, and the plantain, as it's cooked in Nigeria, is basically the same as how you'll find it prepared in Jamaica. Even the plant itself is identical, literally a clone carried across the Atlantic. In the 510 years since Thomas de Berlanga first loaded a ship with Plátano de Guinea, New World cuisine has taken 1,000 twists and turns, incorporated new influences, and come up with specialties like this: Jamaica's national dish, ackee and saltfish. But when it comes to the humble fried plantain, well, why mess with something perfect?
Right? You get the caramelization. I don't know how to explain it. You know, when you let it over ripen, the plantain, and then fry it, right? It caramelizes so well. It's not as sweet as a banana, but you get that same kind of flavor.
Pairs well with this as well.
Of course it does. Crazy to imagine, you know, Latin or, you know, Central American, Caribbean cuisine without plantains. It's just such an essential part of how all the flavors work together.
It's really good.
Really good, yeah?
In the late 1780s, Nicolas Baudin, a French explorer, was sailing in Southeast Asia, where somewhere, probably around Yangon, Myanmar, he collected a few samples of the native bananas and brought them across the ocean to the colony of Martinique. For the next half-century, they would stay unnoticed, but eventually someone realized, hey, these sweet bananas are delicious, and brought them to Jamaica, introducing the Western world for the very first time to the original Papuan variety, not just dense and starchy plantains. In the Americas, this species would be given the name Gros Michel, or Big Mike, for reasons that are long lost to history. But what is not lost to history is what would happen when Big Mikes reached the shores of the United States. Now, if you remember in our video about sugar, when we got to the part about the slave trade, I said at the beginning that no matter how bad it might sound, the truth is 100 times worse. We just don't have time to get into every detail in this format. When it comes to bananas, the plot is completely different, but the disclaimer is the same. This is gonna sound bad. It's worse. The story begins innocently enough in the year 1870 when a fisherman named Lorenzo Dow Baker, working on a schooner sailing out of Cape Cod, called in port in Jamaica and on the docks picked up a few bunches of Big Mike bananas, then caught a good wind and made it to New Jersey in less than 2 weeks, before they spoiled. Arriving in the US, he offered these sweet bananas at $2 a bunch, an 800% markup over the price he'd paid to buy them. They sold out in minutes. Lorenzo Dow Baker would never go fishing again. For the next 15 years, he'd sail back and forth to Jamaica, buying bananas and selling them back in the States for massive profits, the fruit becoming an overnight sensation. And finally, in 1885, he took his savings along with some investment capital and started a business that he'd call the Boston Fruit Company. This new venture would scale up fast. Guided by his new partner, the industrialist Andrew Preston, they built a fleet of steamships and innovated refrigeration technology. And within a decade, they were selling more than 15 million bunches of bananas per year into the United States, and demand was insatiable. Now, let's turn our attention for just a second to another part of the Americas and meet the next character in this story. His name was Minor Keith, and he'd inherited his uncle's railroad business in the country of Costa Rica. The local government had contracted the family to build train lines, but then they defaulted on their payments. So in exchange, Minor Keith was granted a massive amount of land, more than 5% of the entire national landmass. So he began to plant bananas and found this to be profitable. Soon enough, he was buying all the available real estate in the region, huge swaths of territory in Panama and Colombia, using them for banana farming as well. The money rolled in and miner Keith put it all in an investment bank, which collapsed and went out of business, leaving him broke and behind on bills. And to save his land, he agreed to a merger with Lorenzo Dow Baker and his banana import empire. And together in 1899, they would introduce the United Fruit Company. The minute this business became official, it immediately controlled 75% of the U.S. banana market, 236,000 acres of Central and South American real estate, and a fleet of 41 cargo boats and steamships. And the United Fruit Company was just getting started. With their resources combined, they would immediately begin buying up more land, burning thousands and thousands of kilometers of jungle, replanting all of it with bananas or other crops, and hiring as workers anyone whose villages they tore down. Easy to pay very little to people with nowhere else to go. To export their fruits, they built container ports and railroads connecting to those ports. And before long, they were overseeing all import and export of entire countries, charging a premium since they owned a monopoly. And they wouldn't stop there. They began diversifying into other industries, taking over postal deliveries, telegraph and communication systems, and gathering more and more power in Latin America. Within a short time, the United Fruit Company, or UFC, owned 3.5 million acres of land across 11 different countries: Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Nicaragua, Colombia, Ecuador, Cuba, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. And across that region, they were so dominant, so ever-present in all aspects of life, that they became known as El Pulpo, the octopus. With so much land and resources, the octopus would become influential in the region's politics, financing candidates who supported their policies, and whenever things went wrong, they called in the United States military. The Marine Corps officially assigned to protect the assets of the United Fruit Company no matter what, to keep U.S. control over Latin American infrastructure. And as for what that looked like in practice, I'm going to give you just a few examples. In the mid-1920s, a Nicaraguan general named Augusto Cesar Sandino began a guerrilla war against the UFC. He'd build up a huge amount of popular support and rally the native people. So the US sent in the Marines to prop up a dictatorship led by the Somoza family, which would execute Sandino and rule Nicaragua with an iron fist until 1979. And even then, when the so-called Sandinistas finally toppled the banana regime, the Reagan administration kept secretly funneling weapons to their rivals. See the Iran-Contra scandal. That is just the tip of the iceberg. In 1928, the workers on a UFC plantation in Colombia went on strike. Their demands were reasonable. They wanted to be given 1 day off a week and to be paid in cash instead of coupons only valid at United Fruit Company stores. But this was too much to ask of the octopus. So after months of refusing to negotiate, they finally asked the US government for help. The Americans reached out to the Colombian president, telling him that if he could not control his own people, the US would do it for him, and threatening an invasion of the country. So in a panic, a meeting was called with the striking workers, a meeting that turned into a massacre. As many as 2,000 killed, their bodies thrown into the Caribbean Sea to cover up the slaughter. This would be memorialized by the writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez with his seminal work, 100 Years of Solitude. And oh my goodness, is there a whole lot more. For the sake of moving this along, we're going to jump ahead to 1954 and this time check in on Guatemala, where the president, Jacopo Arbenz, announced a plan to allow the country's peasants to move onto undeveloped land and make a living as farmers. Now, by this point, pretty much all of the unused real estate was owned by the United Fruit Company, so the government offered them cash in the exact amount that they claimed their land was worth on their tax returns. But of course, their tax returns were bullshit, so they refused. The UFC then reached out to the American Secretary of State and the head of the CIA, both of whom were United Fruit Company shareholders. A PR campaign was launched accusing President Arbenz of being a communist, a Soviet ally, and that was followed by a full-on secret invasion, deposing Arbenz and triggering a 4-decade-long Guatemalan civil war in which more than 200,000 people died, but at least the United Fruit Company got to keep its banana farms. Among President Ardenz's supporters who witnessed all of this firsthand was a young medical school graduate named Che Guevara, for whom this would be a turning point that would set him on a path towards revolution all across the region, fighting against the Americans, but most of all, the influence of the octopus. As for the United Fruit Company, well, public pressure finally started to mount, and they were forced to begin dismantling their monopoly, selling off assets to competitors and facing a growing tide of lawsuits. As more and more of their misdeeds came to light, their brand became toxic, so they renamed themselves United Brands. But then United Brands got caught paying a massive bribe to the president of Honduras. Even more international outcry followed, and finally in 1990, they would relaunch again as Chiquita, which is still in the banana business and still, at least as recently as 2007, financing terrorist groups and right-wing militias in Central and South America. All the way back at the turn of the last century, the writer O. Henry, after spending 6 months in Honduras, coined the term Banana Republic to describe the countries puppeteered by the United Fruit Company and other related businesses. The catastrophic fallout from everything that took place in Nicaragua, Colombia, Guatemala, and beyond, in Panama, Cuba, Honduras, Haiti, and the rest of the banana republics, it's all way too much for us to even begin to quantify in a video like this. So we'll just leave it there and take a break. Believe it or not, the last segment could have been a lot worse. United Fruit Company was by no means alone, and focusing on them means we didn't even get into the 1911 coup in Honduras, courtesy Cayamel Fruit Company and its owner, Samuel Zamuri, or Sam the Banana Man. We skipped right past the crackdowns on labor unions courtesy Standard Fruit, now known as Dole. But this is a story about bananas, and it's not fair to only focus on some of the world's worst people, because the plant itself deserves better. It's led to a lot of awful stuff, but that's not the banana's fault. It's just a fruit.
All right, so when's the last time you had a banana split?
I don't know. I don't think I had it ever.
Really?
Yeah.
It's such an iconic part of like an American childhood. Like, looking back on it now, I feel a little bit guilty for perpetuating all the me at 5 years old eating my birthday banana split. Should have known the damage I was causing. Okay, let's try this. I don't think I've had one of these in, without exaggerating,
What is it?
35 years. I don't even remember.
It's ice cream?
It's ice cream. This is your first banana split.
I think so.
Like, you clearly didn't. It should be Neapolitan.
We didn't really have bananas in post-Soviet era. It was still very rare and too tropical.
That is a really good segue to the segment we're about to get to, actually. Yeah, all right, so I'm going to eat this quickly. Banana pancakes. This is one thing that's super interesting about being in Southeast Asia. You've heard of the banana pancake trail? So Neapolitan ice cream, by the way, you got chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, 1 scoop of each. That's just so you're aware, you've just jacked all the chocolate ice cream. So they call this the banana pancake trail, the backpacking in Southeast Asia, because of, like, in the 70s, and you know, you can kind of hear that story in the video we taped with the founders of The Lonely Planet. Yeah, so when people started backpacking in Southeast Asia, this was the one thing that was like everywhere. You know, if you're staying in a hostel somewhere in, you know, India or Thailand or Indonesia, that was like banana pancakes. It's the one thing that kind of everybody started making to appeal to backpackers and tourists. So now that's literally the name for, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, who takes butter by fork. So yeah, like that was the nickname. It still is to a degree if you meet older travelers, but like backpacking was known as going on the banana pancake trail. Yeah. It's really good.
It's really good. I'm a little bit confused with all the cutlery.
I don't think I'm used to sharing this. As a kid, you just get this for yourself and just dive in, you know.
That's a lot of calories.
Oh no, by now, my current age, the heartburn would just sink me for the rest of the day. Ugh. When's the last time, Dennis, for you, growing up in Texas, that you had a banana split? Yeah, when's the last time, do you think?
Oh, banana split?
Yeah.
Maybe a couple years ago.
couple of years ago. That's right. You're more of
Swenson?
a Swenson's guy than. Swenson still survives in Thailand. This is if you're American and you're watching this and you remember as a child 60 years ago going to Swenson's, and it's been gone forever. Like since probably the 80s. Like you don't see Swenson's anywhere in Thailand. It survives and is thriving. There's a Swenson's on every corner. Only here, serving their banana split. But we prefer to support local businesses like Mickey's Diner from our good friend Charlie.
In the aftermath of World War II, the country of Germany was devastated, the economy in shambles, and the nation split into two halves, East and West. In the beginning, the western half would struggle. Looting and starvation was rampant, and the outside world stayed away, thanks to the stigma of the horrors that had just unfolded. But it wasn't long before everything would start to change. Now, this is a video about bananas, not the post-war German economy, so I'll blow past the details, but basically by the early 1950s, manufacturing was booming, migrants from all across the continent were flooding in, and thanks to free trade policies, exotic goods from far away started appearing on grocery store shelves, including, of course, bananas. Now, I don't know why this fruit became such an obsession in West Germany, but it did, and quickly turned into the symbol of the new cosmopolitan culture. To show you how important this was, in 1957 the European democracies came together to negotiate an economic alliance, what would become known as the Treaty of Rome, the predecessor of the EU. During the conference, the French proposed a high tariff on imported bananas to boost sales of their own stock, grown on Martinique and Guadeloupe. The German delegation was so enraged that they stormed out of the conference. The entire union almost fell apart, and in the end a compromise was reached known as the Banana Protocol, carving out an exception to the tariffs only for West Germany. When Konrad Adenauer, the West German chancellor, returned home, he strode into parliament hoisting a banana in triumph, and from then on he would be viewed as a hero. So much so that in 2003, almost 4 decades after his death, he would be named the greatest German of all time in a massive nationwide poll, just ahead in order of Martin Luther, Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, Johannes Gutenberg, and Johann Sebastian Bach. Anyway, throughout the rest of the Cold War, bananas would be a showcase of the living standards of the West in comparison to the failures of communism. From a PR standpoint, this was everything. We have fruit from the tropics, you have empty grocery store shelves. There was a common joke that said if one got lost in Berlin, they could put a banana on top of the wall. Whichever side gets eaten first, well, that's the East. In 1989, when the wall came down, every East German citizen was given 100 Deutschmarks, around $150 in today's money, as a welcome gift, an integration into the joys of capitalism. And bananas were the very first item to sell out in supermarkets on that very same day, the most enduring symbol, at least in Berlin, of the fall of communism and the rise of a new era of prosperity. Anyway, the story of bananas in Germany is a fun part of history, but at the same time as Konrad Adenauer was waving his banana in Parliament, another development further to the west in Europe quite possibly saved the fruit from extinction. Now, it might seem unlikely that England would play any role in this video at all. The British were late to appreciate bananas, and when they do finally show up in London, the reaction was less excitement than full-on religious panic. In the years of Queen Victoria, members of the upper class took one look at the shape of this new arrival and quickly started campaigning to have them banned, viewing bananas as a gateway to all kinds of depravity and moral indecency. But thankfully, this outrage did not extend to the Crown's Asian colonies. Let me introduce a man named Charles Telfair, born in Northern Ireland and obscure enough in his time that this is the only portrait that exists. Mr. Telfair was a botanist, and while traveling through India and Southeast Asia, he fell in love with bananas. And whenever he'd find a new variety, he would take a sample, eventually replanting hundreds of them in a greenhouse he built on the island of Mauritius. A long time later, after his death, this collection would pass to an acquaintance in England, a Mr. William Cavendish, the 6th Duke of Devonshire, who didn't share the common objections to bananas. The Duke would take a liking to one strain in particular, which his gardener would name in his honor, the Cavendish, and that was the end of the story, for a while. Fast forward about a century to the 1940s. The Gros Michel, or Big Mike banana, has swept across the planet and millions of acres are being cultivated by the United Fruit Company and other massive conglomerates. Now remember, all reasonably edible bananas are clones. All of them. Every single one. Once a varietal is created, it has to be cut by hand and replanted, which means within any strain there is no genetic diversity, which made bananas the most egregious example of a monoculture in global farming history. What came next should have surprised nobody. The pathogen known as Fusarium wilt tropical race 1, or TR1, is a fungal disease that is fatal and incurable to Big Mike bananas. And in the middle of the 20th century, the TR1 began spreading out of control. Within just a few years, the world's favorite banana was on the verge of being wiped out. Which brings us back to England and the greenhouse now belonging to Andrew Cavendish, the 11th Duke of Devonshire. See, it turns out that the Cavendish banana, the one cut by an obscure botanist somewhere in Southeast Asia, well, it has one unique trait: a complete immunity to TR1. So overnight, the entire worldwide banana industry pivoted, and to this day, if you are under 80, there's a very good chance that every single banana you've ever eaten in your entire life is a Cavendish. Now, Cavendish bananas and Big Mikes are not identical. In fact, from a flavor standpoint, they are extremely different. The Big Mike loaded with a compound known as isoamyl acetate, the same thing found in stuff like Hefeweizen or wheat beer. It was much sweeter than the Cavendish, the taste a lot more intense. If you've ever wondered why banana-flavored candy doesn't taste like bananas, well, that's because pretty much all of the major brands started making their products in the early 20th century. Their flavor isn't wrong, it's just based on a banana that no longer exists. Well, at least on a major commercial scale. There are a few farms in Cuba and Puerto Rico where Big Mikes still survive. There's one cluster in a nature reserve in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and then there's Southeast Asia, where in Malaysia and Indonesia it is still beloved, known as the Pisang Ambon. But most of all, well, there's Thailand, where somehow the strain is so common it's sold at 7-Elevens. Most people in this country have no idea the legacy, the rise and fall of the glue homtong, the everyday banana. But we do. So let's make one last stop at a Bangkok fruit market. In 1783, 1 year after the founding of the city of Bangkok, a canal called Maha Nak was dug, cutting across the Old Town, or as it was called then, the town. At the end, where it intersected with another waterway, it became a hub for trade, specifically fresh produce brought from the farmland in Nonthaburi then sold from boat to residents of the capital. Then at some point in the early 20th century, that commerce moved onto land and thus was built Maha Nak Fruit Market. Still to this day the supply hub for local restaurants, open 24 hours and selling pretty much only organic local fruit, with a focus most of all on bananas.
Okay, so it's like 3, 4 in the afternoon. We are way too late for the peak of the market. This is like any other wet market. You come here at 6 in the morning, you're gonna see a lot more than you do at middle of the afternoon. But the Big Mikes, the extinct, most of the world, Gros Michel bananas. This is them here. There's a ton of different varietals. We're gonna try it in just a few minutes. But I also wanna show you real quick while we're walking around before we get to the end of the market. If you look behind me, you also have vendors not just selling bananas, but leaves. So the banana leaves that are being used to like line tables, you use this as a plate, you can use this as a, whatever you want to do. You can wrap your moks with this. But yeah, the banana leaves, this is what this is. So we see those all around the market as well. We're going to explore for a few more minutes and then let's start trying some bananas. Trying some more bananas. The lady just was nice enough to give us a taste just a second ago. I have a feeling that's not the last one we're going to eat while we're here. This might be a minute. The biggest tragedy would be if the satay got knocked down, but thankfully it seems like Not the first time this truck has driven through this market.
On the island of Papua, there's a type of banana called the fei, which grows facing up instead of down, turns a dark shade of orange when ripe, and supposedly tastes something like a yam or sweet potato. This is significant because it's the only edible banana known to man that does not derive from Musa acuminata, and the only, quote, dessert banana that's not a hybrid of Musa babesioana. Other than that one variety, all the rest of the 1,000 or so variations of bananas or plantains share the same ancestors, the exact same origin, just with differences in soil and sunlight and a few thousand years of selective breeding to suit local needs or palates. Outside of the tropics, the Cavendish banana has nearly a 100% market share. But here in just these few square blocks in Bangkok, there are dozens of banana varietals, including some I've never seen before.
This is so wild. Like, thank you very much. Okay, real quickly, every booth here has like, we're just getting bananas from the farms. There's so many different species being sold here. I just saw this, and this, which looks like all the same thing. You look at the details are different, the stems are different. So these are different species. She's given us tastes. This one, this, okay. It almost tastes like it's made of rum. It's like a fermented taste, but it's fresh. It's like there's so much, I don't even know how to describe the flavor. It tastes like rum. It tastes like it's a banana rum. You can see the inside of it. All right, let's try this other one she's just given us. And that one almost tastes like it's like herbal, dill. I don't know, like I don't know how to describe it. There's so much more going on with even these tiny ones than there is like the stuff you find at a grocery store. Well, that's delicious. Okay, I don't know which one I like the most. I'm gonna get both. As we're exploring, like in Mahanak, the fruit market, I saw these, and I've never seen this before. I mean, I'm sure I have. It never registered with me before. These don't look like any kind of bananas I've ever seen. These are for grilling. So these are going to be the starchier cooking bananas, you know, as we've talked about in this video. This is super cool. I don't know what I'm going to do with these, but I'm going to buy them because I can't just be that guy who stands here to market, like taking videos and then just puts them down and walks away. Taurai, how about? Okay. We'll get the riper ones. All right, so we're still gonna explore a little bit more. There's some more stuff I wanna pick up, but while we are here, let me try the Gros Michel, Big Mike. Again, like, never really realized here how few people on the planet still get to try this. You know, it really blew my mind. And I think of all the things that we were kind of researching for this video, one of the things that was just the craziest was that this banana is the reason why banana candies don't taste like banana, because like it's all based on this varietal, but you can't get this varietal outside just a few places anymore. This tastes like a artificially flavored banana in a way, because that's where we associate that sweetness, that like, it's crazy to realize that like, this is just a better, fresher, more organic version of what you get at 7-Elevens in Thailand, of like what you get everywhere here. Yeah, it tastes like a banana amplified. I mean, it's still a banana, but like compared to the variety that, you know, the Cavendish that most people, you know, get more than half of the global market right now, this is sweeter, it's a bigger flavor. I mean, I would give you a taste, Dennis, but like, you know what this tastes like. You're like, this is the banana of Thailand. That gentleman has walked past 3 times, and each time he asks me if it's delicious. Let's keep walking. Well,
Crazy. Okay, so we were not planning for this. We put all of our gear away. We're in the car going back to my house, and our driver overheard us talking about the kinds of bananas that we just saw at the market, and he was telling us which ones are his favorites. His cell phone lock screen is himself in front of bananas on his banana farm in Phetchabun province. So we're just gonna start rolling tape again, and I'm gonna give the microphone to Kun Komsan in the front seat. And Dennis, I'll just let you guys can just continue the conversation you were already having about banana cultivation. This is OTR does stand for on the road occasionally. Sir, I'm gonna just throw this microphone just like this. In our very last video, we were driving past the cave where those kids got rescued, the inspiration for the Ron Howard movie, and it turned out our driver was one of the rescuers. That was literally the last show we taped, and so of course today who picks us up but an actual commercial banana farmer, moonlighting as a driver when he's here in the city.
ของพี่ปลูกหลายสายพันธุ์แต่สายพันธุ์ไหนที่ขายดีอร่อย
มะลิอ่องครับสายพันธุ์มะลิอ่องจะขายดีสุดครับ
ทำไมถึงขายดี
รสชาติแล้วก็เรื่องของขนาดของผลขนาดของผลเขาจะใหญ่กว่าสายพันธุ์อื่นๆครับแล้วก็เวลาเขาออกหวีมันเนี่ยหวีเขาจะสวยครับคนไทยก็เขาเรียกอะไรความเชื่อเอากล้วยไปหวีเอากล้วยหวีสวยๆไปไหว้อะนะจะเป็นอย่างนั้นเราจะได้ขายเพราะว่าหวีเขาสวยกล้วยสายพันธุ์เนี้ย
แล้วก็การดูแลนี่มันยากไหม
ดูแลยากไหมก็จริงๆกล้วยน้ำว้าดูแลไม่ยากนะครับดูแลง่ายเราดูแค่วัชพืชแล้วก็ดูพวกเชื้อราพวกอะไรมันแล้วก็พอหลังจาก3เดือนเนี่ยพอหลังจาก3เดือนเขาจะเริ่มโตพอโตแล้วมันจะมีหน่อเล็กๆขึ้นมาใหม่รอบๆเครือเนี่ยถ้าเราจะปลูกเอาลูกมันแบบนี้นะครับเราจะต้องตัดแต่งหน่อทุก3เดือนตัดแต่งหน่อทุก3เดือนก็คือ1กอเนี่ยเราจะให้มีหน่อลูกได้แค่หน่อเดียวครับผมแล้วก็หลังจากนั้นอีก3เดือนทุกๆ3เดือนตัดแต่งหน่อครับถ้าเราจะปลูกเอาลูกครับประมาณนั้นแหละครับ
Can you ask him, has he ever seen Nang Tani?
นางตานี
The spirit of the banana trees, has he ever seen her?
ถามว่าเคยเจอไหม
ไม่เคยเจอ อันนั้นเขาเรียกอะไรเป็นเรื่องเล่าหลอกเด็กอ่ะมันเป็นเรื่องเล่าดอกเด็กเป็นการสร้างมันเหมือนกับเป็นการสร้างนิยายสร้างอะไรมาประมาณนั้นแหละครับ
เท่าที่พี่รู้เรื่องเป็นยังไง
เรื่องอะไรเอ่ย
นาง
Nang Tani.
มันก็เหมือนคือลักษณะคล้ายๆกับโกสอ่ะเหมือนเป็นผีนางต้นกล้วยอะไรประมาณนี้แหละครับเป็นผีนางต้นกล้วยก็เหมือนกับอะไรนะมีวิญญาณเข้าไปสิงอยู่ในต้นกล้วยคอยหลอกชาวบ้านคอยหลอกผู้ชายอะไรประมาณนี้ครับเป็นผีนางตานีมันก็เป็นเรื่องเล่าเนาะแต่ผมว่ามันไม่จริงอ่ะเพราะผมทำกล้วยมาจะถึง10 ปีแล้วก็ยังไม่เคยเจอ เพราะว่าอย่างบางคนเขาบอกว่าคุณอย่าไปฉี่รถใส่ต้นกล้วยนะระวังผีนางตานีมาหลอกเอานะอะไรประมาณนั้นแหละผมก็อยากลองผมก็ลองฉี่ดูก็ไม่เห็นมีอะไรนะ ประมาณนั้น
In the 70 years since the Gros Michel or Big Mike banana disappeared from commercial plantations, we've had a lot of time to figure out what went wrong, how monoculture farming can lead to catastrophe. But of course, we didn't use all that time. We still farm bananas in exactly the same way, and somehow it's happening again. This time, the pathogen is the TR4, and it is decimating Cavendish banana crops all over the world. The situation right now is dire enough that experts figure we have somewhere around a decade before the Cavendish is also gone. And one day you're telling your grandchildren about what a banana used to taste like way back in the 2020s. Now, there are two obvious choices for how to deal with this problem. One, we can finally learn our lesson, diversify our agriculture, and rotate crops to keep soil healthy. Or two, we can just find another strain of bananas resistant to this disease and start the process again. Of course, we are choosing door number 3. See, the problem is since the world eats so many bananas, 55 million metric tons of Cavendish alone, this one species 99% of the global export market. Well, that means that by now our entire supply chain ecosystem has been built around this product. Our containers have been outfitted to ripen the fruits at exactly the right time. Our warehouses and grocery stores built around the Cavendish, all identically because, of course, it is a clone. Every single Cavendish biologically exactly the same. Anyway, it would cost a lot of money to adapt to a different species. So at this moment, scientists are hard at work genetically engineering a new breed of super Cavendish. And it's working. So far, companies in Australia and China have pioneered TR4-resistant Cavendish bananas. Not because they taste better than the alternative, but because it's the most profitable option. And that is a pretty good metaphor for the story of the banana. A simple plant growing in the Asian tropics until one fluke of nature changed the entire course of everything. From ancient India to the Middle East, the Pacific Islands to Sub-Saharan Africa, in the Caribbean colonies, the plantations of Central and South America, and even right next to the Berlin Wall, the banana has rewritten history, created civilizations and built fortunes. We bake banana bread at home and celebrate with glasses of banana beer. We enjoy bananas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as a snack or side dish, or as the star of the show. It hasn't always been easy, but that's because of us, not the fruit itself. Because all the banana ever did is taste good. Blame us, not the banana. And if anything, the next time you are in a grocery store and see one, or notice a reference in a movie or a TV show or anywhere else in our everyday lives, take a second to appreciate how crazy it is that this ever even happened, and give a little bit of credit to the humble banana. So long. Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. It really helps to keep us going. Find links below to our Patreon and social media, and we'll see you soon. We've got what we were looking for. Let's keep exploring. Oh. Cat, move. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Hey, hey, hey. Go. Hey, hey. Well, that's a market cat. You rolling? Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to save the life of a market cat from getting run over. That cat is fine. It knows exactly what it's doing.
I think it at least has 6 lives left.
It has about 6 lives left. Okay. Thank you, Kat. All right, let's keep walking. I'm going to try this in a second.